Biden announces new infrastructure plans around cybersecurity. A Spaceforce commander is removed from his position after going on a conservative podcast. And YouTube takes down videos put up by an Asian Uber driver after his vehicle gets attacked. These stories and more on your May 17th Not So News update. Please like and subscribe if you're looking for daily news content, and let's dive on in. Starting us off from the Hill, Krebs on Biden's cybersecurity executive order. It's a really ambitious plan. Notably, I actually am looking forward to seeing what is being done around cybersecurity. I know with the pipeline attack last week, cybersecurity has actually kind of been on everyone's mind. We recognize now how a cybersecurity attack can actually stop the nation. I know gas prices in my area are still up around 20-30 cents after the attack. A lot of gas stations are now finally starting to get fuel again, but nonetheless, we can see how if this type of attack was done on our electric grid or against something like water, power, whatever, any type of big infrastructure, we could see big issues. And I think it's time that cybersecurity actually gets taken seriously. In their article, Christopher Krebs, the national former top cybersecurity official, said President Biden's executive order aimed at improving federal cybersecurity is a real ambitious plan in the wake of the U.S. Colonial Pipeline being targeted in a ransomware era attack. Biden on Wednesday signed an executive order that requires the establishment of baseline cybersecurity standards for all software sold to the federal government. It also calls on all software utilized by the government to meet those standards within 9 months. My biggest issue with this is I'm not sure how this would affect things like government sponsored monopolies, things like water, power plants. Those are the places that I think are the biggest issues when it comes to us needing cybersecurity. And my understanding is because those are privately owned, they would not be under these regulations or whatever. And I think those government monopolies are the ones that are most in need of having any type of regulation because it is a government sponsored monopoly. Just having it so it's government software that's being protected, in my opinion, is not enough. As far as I know, we don't actually have many big data leaks coming from outside sources. Most of the data leaks from federal government stuff has been from interior stuff. Obviously, they're not going to let us know, if any top secret info is actually being hacked by China or whatever. But this almost seems like they're thinking that it is. Also, I didn't see that they actually gave any of the actual details of these standards. I know most places have in the private sector a standard of what's considered safe and reliable for coding standards, but they're not specifically being mentioned in these. However, I think this is a reasonable first step. The question is, how will this then go over to private sector? In our big story for the day, a Spaceforce commander fired after comments made on a conservative podcast. We're going to be looking at 2 stories from this. The first coming from CNN Politics, who goes into a little bit more detail of what the individual actual said. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer joined the Steve Gruber show to discuss his new book, Irresistible Revolution, Marxism, Goal, and Conquest in the Unmaking of the American Military, which alleges that Marxist ideology are being widespread within the armed forces. He expounded on those concerns in the podcast. Since taking command as a commander about 10 months ago, I saw what I consider fundamentally incompatible and competing narratives of what America was, is, and should be, Lohmeyer said. That wasn't just prolific in social media or throughout the country during this past year, but it was spreading throughout the United States military, and I'd recognize those narratives as being Marxism in nature. When pressed on what exactly meant and what he meant, Lohmeyer declared that New York Times 1619 project, a historical look at how slavery formed American institutions as anti-American. It teaches intensive teaching that I heard at my base, that at the time the country ratified the U.S. Constitution and codified white supremacy as the law of the land. Lohmeyer said, if you want to disagree with that, then you start being labeled all manner of things, including racists. He apparently did not respond to CNN's request for comment. I personally don't think there's any issue with the comments he made here. They didn't give any other more detailed comments, but this seems like comments that would be reasonable from anyone serving the military to have, saying that, I have an issue with critical race theory. That seems like a reasonable standard. We're going to be looking at this in a minute, what actually constitutes critical race theory. But I want to first look at the Washington Examiner, who also reported on this story. and gave into some of more of the comments or more in the process of how he actually got fired. Lieutenant General Stephen Whiting, Space Operations Command Commander, relieved Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lomer of command of the 11th Space Warning Squadron, Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado, May 14, due to loss of trust and confidence in his ability to lead. The Space Force said in a statement to the Washington Examiner, the decision was based on the public comments made by Lomer in a recent podcast. And they said that these comments constitute prohibited partisan political activity. So, according to them, Lomer's self-published book, the book, according to the description, explores the impact of a neo-Marxist agenda in the manner in which the BLM movement, anti-racism, postmodernism, and political correctness affects the national security of the United States. Lomer said that he told his superiors, public affairs staff, and lawyers, and the military about the book prior to publication, but was not subject to pre-publication review. What that means is they would have gotten the summary of what's in the book, but not actually the details, which in my opinion means that if they actually gave the okay ahead of time, based on, you know, the back page summary of the book, that would have been perfectly fine. And it doesn't seem like his book actually went against anything, mainly because they actually haven't quoted anything from his book in this attack. So now going into what actually is the standard for being involved in politics when serving, Department of Defense Directive 1344.10 prohibits active duty personnel from engaging in partisan political activities. Service members are, however, permitted to express their personal opinions on political candidates and issues in their personal capacity when not in uniform. Lomer denied intending to participate in partisan politics. The one thing that I guess is the question is, when he went on the podcast, did he do it in uniform as the commander, or did he do it in his own private manner? And that seems like that would be the question for whether he actually, you know, did some type of political act. My intent never has been to engage in partisan politics. I've written a book about a particular political ideology, Marxism, in the hope that our Defense Department might return to being politically nonpartisan in the future, as it has honorably done throughout the history, he told military.com. I don't demonize the man, but I want to make sure clear, both him and every service member, this agenda, it will divide us, it will not unify us. Lomer, who was the commanding officer who took him down, said. He was also involved in the 60-day wide extremism stand down, which was in a response to military officials being involved in the January 6th riots. So I guess the big thing here is, do we need to say that it's reasonable for military officials to go against critical race theory? I personally think it's pretty reasonable. It seems like it's right now a 50-50 divide. I don't think we should say that army officials need to necessarily not be on part of the 50-50 divide. It doesn't seem reasonable to me. However, I do agree that you should not be doing this in your uniform, which then begs the question of, if this is being taught as part of the military program for any type of like race training or whatever, that to me seems that the military is the one breaking the 1344.10 guideline, going against you know, the guideline that they should not be engaging in partisan activities as part of the military. So, for reference, when we're talking about critical race theory, Jack Prosebiak gave the following definitions that I think are reasonable. Under critical theory, which is the basis of critical race theory would obviously be part of the subset of critical theory. Critical theory is a Marxist approach to social philosophy that focuses on reflective assessment and critique of society and culture in order to reveal and challenge power struggles. So, what we'll get from that is critical race theory is specifically looking at power struggles based on race. Coming from Britannica, critical theory, Marxist-inspired movement in social and political philosophy, originally associated with the work of the Frankfurt School, drawing particularly on the thought of Karl Marx and Freud. Critical theories maintains that primary goal of, and that's where it's called off. The main thing is that this is Marxist-inspired. Coming from Harvard, association with critical theories of the Frankfurt School, Habermas simultaneously conceives of society as a life word and as a system. Highly original discipline, Adorno and Hochmeier. His work continues in the line through originated by the Frankfurt School, drawing on Marxist tradition in Kantian philosophy. And finally, coming from plato.stanford.edu, critical theory is in the narrow sense designates several generations of German philosophers and social theorists in the Western European Marxist traditions known as the Frankfurt School. According to these theorists, a critical theory may be distinguished from a traditional theory according to a specific practical purpose. A theory is critical to the extent that it seeks human emancipation from slavery, acts as a liberating influence, and works to create the world which satisfies the needs and powers of human beings. So, long story short, when they tell you that it's critical theory, they're not using theory in the same way that we would use theory when talking about like a scientific theory. A scientific theory is one where it is the only standing hypothesis, and that has a very specific meaning. In terms of these critical race theory, what they're specifically saying is that they're using this this idea that there's everything in the world is based on power struggles, and that's how you should see the world. That's not the same thing, and it should be necessarily be attacked upon. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that individuals in our military do not need to be Marxists, and if they say something that is anti-Marxist in their own personal opinion, that should not be taken at issue whatsoever. Finally, coming from Inquire More, we see when we take this type of woke Marxist politics to the extreme. An Asian Uber driver was attacked by a mob, then YouTube took down a video of his beating. In February, Google CEO Sundar Pichai tweeted about how we shouldn't let violence against Asian Americans fade from the headlines. He assured the general public that all of us at Google will stand with and support you. Google was going to work to stop Asian hate. These words are unlikely to be comforting to Vision King. In mid-May, the West Virginia native and Uber driver arrived for a pickup in Morgantown, where he was greeted with a mob of people who were involved in some kind of fistfight. He soon discovered that his intended passengers were fighting with people in the crowd. Those passengers fled to the crowd, and the mob attacked them. King even the car itself doing as much as 1,500 damage. The Metro News, a West Virginia news outlet, covered the mob attack. Shortly after the attack, King set up a GoFundMe to help pay for the damages. What I find most ridiculous is that the take for Uber, it's often 50% of the fare, especially with the $310 safe ride fee, but their deductible for instance like this is $2,500. And my own insurance disclaimed the event because of Uber, so I get the entire bill. As evidence of assault, King uploaded a video on YouTube, and if you try to watch it now, YouTube notes that the video goes against their terms of service. YouTube simply said that the video violates community standards. I appealed and they quickly denied it. He told me over email, currently I have a strike for uploading them, so I cannot upload any videos for YouTube at the time. I reached out to Google's press office and asked them what exactly about King's video violated the service. Elena Hernandez, who works in the office, told me the video violated our policies on violent and graphic content. She linked me to the page that says violent or gory content intended to shock or disgust viewers, or content encouraging others to commit violence acts are not allowed on YouTube. Not clear how exactly this policy is enforced. You can find all kinds of violent content on YouTube, including clips of political violence. King also uploaded videos to Twitter, and they were not taken down. So, long story short, what we see here is the biggest issue that comes out of critical theory, is that it's really just a perpetuation of mob justice. When you go against the mob, then you are going against the lower people, you're going against the bourgeois class. And in my opinion, this just embodies it to the extreme, that they are admittedly going against Asian Americans in a time where they're apparently attacking Asian American hate, which was demonstrated in this attack against an Asian American. And the whole reason for going against it is because it was a mob attacking that Asian American. And this is your May 17th Not So News update. Once again, please like and subscribe if you're looking for daily news content, and have a good one.